The amber glow of oil lamps cast long shadows across the marble floors of the imperial palace as the newly crowned Emperor Nero reclined on his gilded couch. It was 54 CE, and at merely 17 years of age, he had just ascended to rule the vast Roman Empire following the suspicious death of his stepfather, Emperor Claudius. As servants poured wine into his goblet, Nero could not have known that his actions over the next 14 years would serve as a perfect catalogue of what not to do after gaining imperial power. History offers us a remarkable treasury of cautionary tales about imperial leadership. From the sun-baked palaces of ancient China to the columned forums of Rome, from the Persian heartlands to the cold stone castles of medieval Europe, we see patterns emerge when power becomes concentrated in the hands of a single ruler. The consequences of poor judgment echo across centuries, teaching us timeless lessons about leadership, governance, and human nature. Consider the case of Emperor Caligula of Rome, who ruled from 37 to 41 CE. Upon becoming emperor, Caligula was initially popular with the Roman public. However, after recovering from a severe illness in 37 CE, his behavior became increasingly erratic. He began to present himself as a god, demanded to be worshipped as such, and even appointed his horse, Incitatus, as a consul. His financial extravagance drained the imperial treasury that his predecessor Tiberius had carefully accumulated. Within 4 years, he was assassinated by his own Praetorian Guard. Emperor Commodus, who ruled Rome from 180 to 192 CE, provides another instructive example. The son of the respected Emperor Marcus Aurelius, Commodus abandoned his father's careful attention to governance and military matters. Instead, he indulged in his passion for gladiatorial combat, even participating in the arena himself against poorly armed opponents or disabled individuals, a profound dishonor for a Roman emperor. He renamed Rome Colonia Commodiana after himself and had himself depicted as the god Hercules. His neglect of imperial duties led to economic crisis and eventually his assassination on December 31, 192 CE. One of the most dramatic illustrations comes from China's Qin Shi Huang, who became the first emperor of a unified China in 221 BCE. While his accomplishments in standardizing weights, measures, currency, and even writing were remarkable, his later years reveal the dangers of paranoia and obsession. Surviving at least 3 assassination attempts, he became increasingly isolated and fixated on achieving immortality. He consumed mercury pills prescribed by his alchemists, ironically hastening his death in 210 BCE at age 49. His tomb, guarded by the famous terracotta army, stands as a monument to both his greatness and his folly. These examples reveal consistent patterns of imperial failure that transcend time and culture. Let us explore the fatal mistakes that have repeatedly undermined great empires throughout history. First among these errors is the elimination of capable advisors and potential rivals immediately upon taking power. Emperor Wang Mang of China's brief Qin dynasty, 9 to 23 CE, purged experienced Han dynasty officials, depriving himself of crucial administrative expertise. Similarly, Ottoman Sultan Mehmed III, upon his ascension in 1595, followed the Ottoman succession practice of fratricide, executing his 19 brothers to secure his position. While this eliminated immediate rivals, it created deep resentment within the court and populace. The Byzantine Emperor Justinian II, after regaining his throne in 705 CE following a coup that had previously deposed him, embarked on a campaign of brutal revenge against his enemies. He executed many former opponents in particularly cruel ways, including having the Patriarch Callinicus blinded and exiled. This vindictiveness created a climate of fear and resentment that undermined his support, leading to his eventual overthrow and execution in 711 CE. Roman Emperor Diocletian, who ruled from 284 to 305 CE, offers a contrasting example of wiser governance. Despite his persecution of Christians, Diocletian recognized the empire had grown too large for one man to administer effectively. In 293 CE, he established the Tetrarchy, a system of rule by 4 emperors that temporarily stabilized the crisis-ridden empire. By distributing rather than hoarding power, he extended the life of the Roman imperial system. Another critical mistake is fiscal irresponsibility, depleting imperial treasuries for personal indulgence. Louis XVI of France inherited a kingdom with already serious financial problems in 1774, but his continued extravagance and failure to implement meaningful reforms exacerbated the crisis. The lavish spending at Versailles, including the maintenance of the elaborate palace and grounds, consumed enormous resources while ordinary French citizens struggled with rising bread prices and high taxes. By 1789, the financial situation had become so dire that Louis was forced to convene the Estates General, setting in motion the French Revolution that would cost him his throne and eventually his life in 1793. Similarly, Emperor Nero depleted Rome's treasury with his extravagant building projects, particularly the Domus Aurea, Golden House, his massive personal palace complex constructed after the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE. This 300-acre complex featured artificial lakes, colonnades, and a 120-foot bronze statue of Nero himself. The financial strain of these projects, combined with his neglect of military and administrative duties, contributed to revolts that ultimately led to his suicide in 68 CE as armies marched on Rome. By contrast, Emperor Augustus, who ruled Rome from 27 BCE to 14 CE, maintained strict fiscal discipline. He published regular accounts of public finances, established a treasury, the aerarium militare, specifically to fund military pensions, and left the empire with a substantial surplus upon his death. His financial prudence provided resources for extensive public works, including his famous boast that he'd found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. Perhaps the most dangerous imperial error is disconnection from the realities of one subject's lives. Emperor Nicholas II of Russia, the last Romanov ruler, failed to recognize the depth of suffering among the Russian people in the early 20th century. When peaceful protesters approached the Winter Palace on January 22, 1905, a day that would become known as Bloody Sunday, imperial troops opened fire, killing hundreds. This tragic event shattered the traditional view of the Tsar as a benevolent father to his people and set Russia on the path toward revolution. The last emperor of China, Puyi, who was crowned in 1908 at age 2, lived in such isolation within the Forbidden City that he had almost no understanding of the nation he nominally ruled. By the time he was forced to abdicate in 1912 during the Republican Revolution, China's imperial system had become entirely disconnected from the rapidly modernizing world beyond the palace walls. Contrast these examples with Emperor Ashoka of India's Mauryan Empire, who ruled from approximately 268 to 232 BCE. After witnessing the carnage of his conquest of Kalinga around 260 BCE, Ashoka underwent a profound transformation. He converted to Buddhism and devoted himself to the welfare of his subjects, creating hospitals for both humans and animals, building roads with rest houses for travelers, and erecting stone pillars inscribed with edicts promoting moral virtue and religious tolerance. His rock and pillar edicts, which survive today, reveal a ruler deeply concerned with the well-being of all his people. Military neglect and strategic incompetence form another category of imperial failure. Emperor Honorius, who ruled the Western Roman Empire from 393 to 423 CE, focused on his chicken coop while Rome itself was threatened by Visigothic invaders. When informed that Roma had fallen in 410 CE, he reportedly expressed concern for his favorite chicken, also named Roma, before realizing the news referred to the city. His neglect of imperial defense accelerated the Western Empire's collapse. Emperor Valerian of Rome made a catastrophic strategic error during his campaign against Sassanid Persia. In 260 CE, he attended a meeting with King Shapur I to negotiate peace terms but was captured when the Persians violated the truce. Valerian spent the remainder of his life as Shapur's prisoner and personal footstool. Upon Valerian's death, his skin was allegedly stuffed with straw and displayed as a trophy in a Persian temple, perhaps the most humiliating end for any Roman emperor. In contrast, Emperor Trajan, who ruled Rome from 98 to 117 CE, personally led military campaigns that expanded the empire to its greatest territorial extent. He maintained discipline among his troops, shared their hardships on campaign, and combined military success with substantial civil engineering projects. The combination earned him the Senate's official title Optimus Princeps, the best ruler. Cultural insensitivity and religious intolerance have repeatedly undermined imperial authority. Akhenaten of Egypt, reigned approximately 1353 to 1336 BCE, attempted to replace Egypt's traditional polytheistic religion with the worship of a single deity, the Aten or sun disk. This religious revolution disrupted centuries of tradition and alienated the powerful priestly class. After his death, his reforms were quickly abandoned, and later pharaohs even attempted to erase his name from historical records. Emperor Julian the Apostate of Rome, reigned 361 to 363 CE, attempted to reverse the Christianization of the empire and restore traditional Roman religious practices. His efforts generated significant resistance from the growing Christian population. Though his religious policy was not as coercive as the earlier persecution of Christians, his attempt to swim against the cultural tide proved ineffective and died with him during his Persian campaign in 363 CE. By contrast, Mughal Emperor Akbar, who ruled the Indian subcontinent from 1556 to 1605 CE, embraced religious pluralism within his diverse empire. He abolished the jizya tax on non-Muslims, invited scholars of different faiths to court debates, and even created a syncretic faith called Din-i-Ilahi that incorporated elements from various religions. This religious tolerance strengthened his empire by reducing internal tensions and encouraging cultural flourishing. Dynastic instability through poor succession planning has toppled numerous empires. Emperor Marcus Aurelius, despite his wisdom in most matters, made the critical mistake of naming his biological son Commodus as his successor rather than adopting a capable heir as previous good emperors had done. Commodus's incompetence effectively ended the Pax Romana period of stability. Emperor Edward VI of England, knowing he was dying of tuberculosis in 1553 at age 15, attempted to circumvent the succession of his Catholic half-sister Mary by naming his Protestant cousin Lady Jane Grey as heir. This led to a succession crisis upon his death, with Jane ruling for just 9 days before Mary's supporters deposed and eventually executed her. The instability weakened England during a period of religious tension. By contrast, Emperor Kangxi of China's Qing dynasty, who ruled from 1661 to 1722, carefully prepared his chosen successor through extensive education in both martial and civil matters. His grandson, who became the Qianlong Emperor, would preside over one of China's most prosperous and culturally rich periods. The dangers of imperial excess are not merely historical curiosities but offer profound insights for contemporary leadership. The same principles that brought down emperors apply to modern organizational and political leadership. Isolation from reality leads to poor decision-making. Leaders who surround themselves only with yes-men and insulate themselves from uncomfortable truths recreate the fatal bubble that doomed Nicholas II and Louis XVI. Financial discipline remains essential. Organizations and nations that deplete their resources on vanity projects and short-term indulgences, like Nero's Golden Palace, create vulnerability to external threats and internal instability. Competence in core functions cannot be neglected. Just as military preparedness was essential for ancient emperors, modern leaders must maintain excellence in their organization's primary purpose, whether business operations, governance, or service provision. Succession planning determines long-term success. The failure to develop and select capable successors has ended more dynasties and organizations than external conquest. Cultural sensitivity and inclusion create stability. Akbar's religious tolerance and Ashoka's concern for all subjects provide models for modern diverse societies and organizations. The psychology of power itself presents perhaps the most insidious danger. Historical evidence suggests that power literally changes how the brain functions, potentially reducing empathy and increasing risk-taking behavior. Roman Emperor Tiberius, who ruled from 14 to 37 CE, gradually withdrew from public life to the island of Capri, where according to the historian Suetonius, he indulged in increasingly depraved behavior. Whether or not all of Suetonius's lurid accounts are true, Tiberius's isolation certainly reduced his effectiveness as a ruler in his later years. Science now confirms what history has long demonstrated: power can corrupt psychological functioning. The awareness of this danger is itself a protective factor, which may explain why some of history's most effective rulers, like Emperor Ashoka and Marcus Aurelius, engaged in philosophical and spiritual practices that emphasized humility and moral reflection. When Nero committed suicide in 68 CE as rebel armies approached Rome, he allegedly uttered, "Qualis artifex perio, what an artist dies in me." His focus on his perceived artistic talents rather than his failures as a ruler encapsulates the delusion that power often engenders. The year of the 4 emperors that followed his death plunged Rome into civil war, demonstrating how poor leadership creates instability that extends far beyond the ruler's own fate. The lessons of imperial failure transcend time and culture precisely because they reflect fundamental aspects of human psychology and organizational dynamics. Whether in ancient palaces or modern boardrooms, the temptations of power remain constant: isolation, extravagance, neglect of core responsibilities, and self-deception. The emperors who succeeded despite these temptations, Augustus, Trajan, Ashoka, Akbar, Kangxi, share common traits: self-discipline, attention to administrative detail, willingness to hear unpleasant truths, respect for diverse perspectives, and awareness of their own mortality and limitations. These qualities provide a timeless template for effective leadership in any era. As we navigate our own complex world with its concentration of power in various forms, corporate, technological, political, these historical lessons offer crucial guidance. The emperors of old had no handbook warning them what not to do after gaining the throne. Their costly lessons, written in the rise and fall of civilizations, now serve as our guide to more thoughtful leadership and the wiser use of power.